Welcome back to Yesterday's News Today. The hot topic for the hour is Switzerland's journalistic culture. In 1848, the Swiss federal constitution provides a direct democracy-style government, giving all of the citizens a vote on a countrywide basis, making Switzerland more like a true democracy. This continues into contemporary Switzerland as the country still operates under that direct democracy. Here, all registered citizens can vote directly on policies to help decide how their government operates. This influence citizens have within the government allows for guaranteed freedom of speech, religion, and press. The journalists in Switzerland are not watchdogs for the president of Switzerland, who is pictured here, or the Switzerland government, but have a very critical position when it comes to the government. There are no political newspapers pushed by the government or any government-sponsored newspapers. Most of the journalistic work is comprised of the viewpoints of the journalistic organizations so that they can meet their own needs and their own goals. Journalists in Switzerland are passive objective. This means that they do not seek to change the societal atmosphere in their country, but they also have a very critical eye when it comes to the government affairs. Although they have this critical eye on the government, most journalistic entities are loyal to the Swiss government, and they generally agree with the way the government is operating, as a result of their direct democracy. While some view this lack of governmental interface as a positive, others view it negatively, such as interviewee Michelle Michler, the lead Swiss strategist at the World Economic Forum. She pointed this very attribute out when we interviewed her earlier today, and she found this to be a negative aspect that a journalist in Switzerland has no power when it comes to the government affairs. As she believes in North America, journalism has a certain place in society as a watchdog, but not in Switzerland.
Moving on to print journalism. In Switzerland, this is a complex affair. With 4 different languages and regional politics, there are no national newspapers. Switzerland has around 26 German newspapers for the German-speaking regions, which make up 64% of the population. There are 13 French newspapers for the 19% of French speakers, 4 Italian papers for the 8% of Italians, and 4 papers for the 1% Romansh speakers. Free papers have become extremely popular and profitable in Switzerland, as they have become the highest in circulation with a large advertisement income. The most popular newspaper in Switzerland is the free paper 20 Minuten, which is sold in both German and French. 20 Minuten covers a variety of topics from sport, pop culture, international issues. During an interview with a journalist from the Swiss public broadcast, we were told about the issues surrounding printing papers in 4 different languages. About 70% of Swiss speak German, about 25% French, and the rest are divided between Italian and Romansh. There is more money invested in the German part of Switzerland as there are more readers and therefore more interest from advertisers. We also spoke to senior journalist Mauro Friero, who explained the language breakdown in more depth.
Italian is probably the most beautiful language to hear, but it's also true that it's a rather poor language. It's difficult to express something very precisely. German, instead, is a very precise language, a very rich language with an awful amount of words, of every verb, every substantive. It's very, very, very precise. So I think German journalism is more precise, is more interesting, is more neutral somehow. Obviously, it is probably not, but the approach is more precise.
Broadcast journalism has to provide relevant and quality programming to essentially 4 different nations. The main broadcasting corporation in Switzerland is known as SRG-SSR. SRG-SSR has 5 units of their corporation. These are Radio and Television Switzerland, Radio Television Romansh, Radio Television Swiss, Schweizer Radio und Fernsehen, and Swiss Info.
Let's talk about censorship. In Article 17 of the Constitution, it is written, "Freedom of the press, radio, and television, other forms of dissemination of features and information by means of public telecommunications is guaranteed. Censorship is prohibited. The protection of sources is guaranteed." Switzerland's censorship-free journalistic culture gives their journalists freedom of the press, radio, television, and other forms of broadcasting, much like here in the United States. Let's ask Mauro Friero about what he thinks of censorship. Mauro?
Here you touch a very delicate subject. There is no, and there could be no restriction, no censorship. Definitely no. This would go against any rule of journalism as we understand it. But it is true that sometimes some boss of you doesn't want you to talk about something, but it is usually not for political reasons. It's rather for about the content. Maybe the content is not fitting a certain program or some other reasons. No, we don't have any kind of censorship.
While censorship and government do not pose challenges to Switzerland's journalistic culture, challenges brought to light by our interviewees are noteworthy. First, Mary unveils a common challenge that she dubs as audience dictatorship. This audience dictatorship is the pressure to ensure that your story will attract a lot of viewership, and this will directly play into if your media outlet will do well. As a result, this then translates into demands on journalists to do popular stories, so this then produces less of what kind of topic you talk about, but rather how you talk about it. This pressure, she says, results in the oversimplification of topics. It is the pressure of storytelling for the mass audience, when sometimes reality is not just as simple as fiction, where you need to do more than just telling a story. The audience dictatorship is viable in Switzerland. For example, the Swiss Public Broadcasting Corporation is financed by viewership fees in private broadcasters, which finance themselves through advertisers and private membership fees. Both public and private broadcasters rely on the amount of eyeballs on their program, reaffirming Mary's argument that there is indeed an audience dictatorship challenge present. Switzerland's direct democracy allows Swiss journalists to do their job. Journalists in Switzerland are largely similar to practicing journalists in other parts of the Western world. They have the ability to write and report as independent, unbiased entities that remain separate from the government, but the passion for journalism remains the same. That ends our adventure in the journalistic culture of Switzerland. So from all of us at Yesterday's News Today, have a good night.